Many a storyteller has fallen under the spell of this byway, with its rich, deep lore dating back centuries.
Now, we've been driving cattle with whips for several centuries before somebody figured this out. But this connection I'm doing with my arm, that makes the tip of the whip travel faster than the speed of sound. That tip incidentally is called a cracker or a popper. What you're hearing is a tiny sonic boom. Cattle hate that sound, they shy away from it. It makes it easy to get them into camp.
Rick Tunyon is a local novelist who spent 15 years researching the cattle industry in the area to write his novel, Guns of the Palmetto Plains.
I was doing a story on the Florida cattle industry, and I read a book by Professor Joe Ackerman, and in that he mentioned the Florida Cattle Guard, or Cow Cavalry, which was a militia unit formed during the war between the states to protect and drive the herds from here to the rest of the South. And it just struck me, hey, that is my subject matter for a book. The horse was reintroduced to Florida by the conquistadors. As a matter of fact, Ponce de Leon took some ashore, but I don't believe any of those survived. It wasn't until several decades later that the horse began to reestablish itself in Florida. The prehistoric horse evolved in Florida and apparently migrated over the barren land strait into Eurasia, where it was eventually domesticated and then came back via the Spaniards. Within a few hundred years, they really flourished here. And then, of course, the Native Americans on the plains adopted it and became legendary. The fact that we hunted wild cattle is why we were called cow hunters rather than cowboys. At the end of a drive, it was customary for cow hunters to ride their horses into saloons. It was partially just for show, partially because actually after hours in the saddle, you're really, really stiff. And it was a lot more comfortable to go in, take your first couple of drinks from horseback to limber up so you can dismount. It started in Kissimmee. One enterprising saloon keeper got tired of replacing doors, so he made a door that was both tall and wide enough to ride a horse through, and that became common practice in the interior of Florida for decades.
There are equestrian trails, and the Tram Road equestrian area in Tiger Bay State Forest is outfitted with campsites, corrals, and other equestrian amenities.
Here we are in the front porch of a cracker house in the middle of the Florida August summer heat, and I'm actually pretty cool. There's a reason for this. It's all about the architecture. They were all designed to keep the occupants as cool as possible. The cracker occupants spent a lot of time out on the front porch, and very often they ate here, they met here, they played music, they danced here into the evening. It was one of the coolest places in the house. Large and often paired windows for cross ventilation, and sometimes a corridor through the middle of the house, a breezeway that was designed to keep the middle of the house cool. Crackers called those dog trots. For very good reasons, dogs used to trot up and down them. Anything that they could do to shelter themselves from the harsh summer heat. And that includes parking the houses under big shade trees.
There are two places along the byway that help preserve the buildings and crafts of the crackers. At the Barberville Pioneer Settlement for the Arts, you'll find one of the byway's hidden gems. The folks here have been preserving local buildings, arts and crafts, music and traditions for years.
What defines a cracker might not even be so much your ethnicity as where you live and what you do when you're living there. And by what you do, I don't mean occupation. I mean your independence, your self-reliance.
Monso Tatum grew up in the area, and his grandfather managed crews for the turpentine stills. This is the one at the Barberville settlement.
This is a turpentine still, and the rosin came through a series of filters and into this trough where it was dipped into molds.
Regular annual festivals provide music, demonstrations, and people in period clothes to help bring the cracker experience to life. Another place on the Byway to see period-related buildings and festivals is at the Silver River State Park. Situated near the Silver River, there is camping, cabins for rent, and a museum. The Cracker Village buildings preserved here replicate life in the Ocala in the late 1800s.
There's nothing like the sights and the senses and the touching and the experiencing firsthand all of these things that are of our, not only of our yesteryears, but of our current life experiences of being in the woods and on the river.
This is a rare byway with a Pulitzer Prize-winning novel inspired about its culture. Marjorie Kennan Rollins was so intrigued by the area and the local crackers that she moved here in the 1930s. For 2 years, she spent time on Pat's Island and in Astor and Volusia listening to stories that would eventually become part of her novel, The Yearling. Richard Mills grew up in the area, became a forester in the Ocala, and retired here. He remembers Marjorie.
But anyway, when Marjorie Rollins ended up, she was a New Yorker, or that is, and a man told me, when I told him all she did, he said, I can't, that's not the same woman. She wore white gloves, she wore high heel shoes. She was an office lady. Well, I wonder about that, because she went native, that's for sure. Then, of course, she met this bootlegger, Leonard Fitty. He took her to Pat's Island, and he introduced her to the Long, Cow Long. Cow Long then tells her all these stories. Then he told her about the pet deer, and that did it. That's what she was looking for.
Pat's Island is not an island in the water, but an island in the forest habitat. You can hike the Yearling Trail and see many of the novel's locations and visit the cemetery of some of the actual characters upon whom the novel was based. Across the road at Silver Glen Springs, you can walk the Boyles Trail and see the setting for the novel's opening chapter. The Academy Award-winning film of The Yearling was shot partially on location on the Byway in 1946.